Before we begin, I wanted to give a huge shout out to the folks at Amazon Music for partnering with us on this episode of the Inside Line F1 podcast. But more on this later. Right then, let's get right into today's episode. Not often we say those three golden words, but when we do, oh, we feel so special saying it. Our chest tends to puff out, we have a big smug smile on our face. And what are those three golden words, Kunal, about this weekend?
We told you so.
There
Is
we
that
are.
four or three?
There,
Okay.
it doesn't matter. We told you. We told you before this weekend. We told you in the middle of the Austrian GP. We've been telling you from the start of last year, but it's not about us. It's just that finally something that we've been seeing materialize for so long has come true. The cake is not ready, I'd say, but it just needs the little bit of icing on the end. But it's mostly baked. It's sweet. The Piastri cake is though the Piastri pastry, if that is a thing, is sweet. It's delicious. It's come to roost.
Absolutely. I mean, one wouldn't care if it's ready or not. It got served today, and it got served in a fashion that we will all remember for time immemorial. So we called an Oscar Piastri race win in the preview episode. In fact, so much so that I remember Sundaram and Somil actually wrote down saying, we got to script it. We got to tell people why he's going to win. But guys, we missed a crucial factor. We didn't anticipate how he's going to win his debut race in Formula One. Could you guys have imagined that this is what it would take for Oscar Piastri to win his first ever Formula One Grand Prix?
Sundaram, I want to really rewind this back because I remember summer of 2021, we were recording in the middle of a busy F1 season. All three of us were there. We were discussing the Piasco. And at that point, we saw the madness. We saw the contract chaos between Alpine and McLaren. And I know you guys weren't wondering about this because we none of us actually said it on the mic. And I was busy sitting thinking, man, is this guy really so good? Is he?
No, exactly, because there was so much of hype around him. And if it's gone to as much as a legal case, Alpine definitely wanted him after they had no more drivers. But that's the thing. Oscar Piastri came in with a lot of promise. He's won Formula 3, he's won Formula 2, that too in his rookie year. So there was so much of hype and focus put around his talent and what he could do in Formula 1. And at that point in time, everyone wanted a piece of him. He made the right choice. He moved to McLaren. He's won a sprint race in his debut rookie year. He's won a Grand Prix in his second year. And I know a lot of the Norris fans are going to hate this, but he has more wins in Formula 1, more race wins. Let me be very specific. Race wins, not saying Grand Prix wins. He has more race wins than Norris at this point. So, yeah, I think it was bound to come at some point in time. And I'm only happy it's happened so soon in just his second season. He's not had to wait any longer. And like Kunal correctly mentioned, the bad luck has to end somewhere. And it almost didn't. It almost didn't. But 2 laps to the end, the bad luck did end, thankfully.
But, there are so many responses to add to what you just said, Sundaram. I'm going to start with, from what I remember you said, Alpine wanted him. McLaren, of course, signed him at the cost of Daniel Ricciardo going. Piasco, Somil, like you said. Alpine very nicely wished him publicly on social media on his race win. Very, very touching. I love it when these human moments happen because, yes, he's a race car winner. Yes, he's a racing car driver. But these human moments, or these moments is what make us human. And these are the human stories that we absolutely love about Formula One.
Wait, did they have a race win clause that if we let him go, we get a certain amount? In football they do, right? Like, they have like a sell-on clause. Like if you sell the player on to someone else, we get a 50% or something. There's no reason for them to wish him that much when they were last.
Come on, let's just appreciate what Alpine. They did one thing right this weekend. Trust me. That was wishing Oscar Piastri, right? Then Sundaram mentioned how F3, F2, etc. He won Formula Renault Regional on debut, F3 on debut, F2 on debut. He has won a race in every single-seater category he's driven in. Okay, and that is incredible talent. And my best moment of Oscar Piastri was just when he ended the official press conference. Okay, he said a couple of things. He said, ultimately, I wasn't as quick as Lando Norris in that final stint. And we all saw that. Lando Norris went from 1.8 seconds ahead to 5.8 seconds, or whatever his finishing margin eventually was. So much so that McLaren came onto the radio and said, yes, Lando, you've proved your point, but we need you to give that position to Oscar Piastri. So Oscar was actually very humble enough to say, I wasn't as quick in that final stint, but this race is all about track position, and I got that track position on that opening lap. But the best of all that Oscar Piastri said was, there was an Australian journalist who said, Daniel Ricciardo has, of course, started the shoey. Are you going to do a shoey to celebrate? And Oscar said, the shoey is Ricciardo's legacy. I'm going to create my own. What a beautiful way to sum up his Grand Prix weekend, and what's to actually look forward to when it comes to Oscar Piastri's career in Formula One.
It is sweet. It is sweet, sweet indeed. Let's just tell you who we are before we talk more about the madness that happened beyond it, because a lot of it did. This is the Inside Line F1 podcast. My name is Somil Arora. I am the host of the Indian Racing League, the Indian Supercross Racing Championship, and also the commentator at the MotoGP Indian Grand Prix. Live with me at Malad Social in Mumbai not this weekend, today itself, a couple of hours ago, was F1 Stats Guru, who you're also going to be listening to, the most followed stats facts page on the internet. But he's more than just that, because apart from his numbers, he has a knack of telling stories alongside with it, which is what gets him in the WTF1 talent pool as well. And his work has been recognized by Crofty, by Autosport, Motorsport.com, The Race, big websites, big people. He's a man who's big himself. And you have something to say, Kunal, before I introduce you.
And his stat, which was that Piastri Norris was the youngest ever front row lockout in the history of Formula One, was broadcast today on the F1 TV broadcast all around the world. So
look at the smile on the guy.
A win for all of us as well.
And of course, the voice that you last heard, Kunal Shah, the man who started this podcast, the former marketing head of the Force India Formula One team. And he is currently a Formula One consultant and also sometimes appears on screen to dissect the sport, like he does on the Inside Line F1 podcast, but for Viaplay in Norway. They are the official broadcasters there. So then, folks, this is the Inside Line F1 podcast, India's best sports podcast recently, and we're going to get down to the business of analyzing the dirty stuff that happened behind the pit wall for McLaren. I think it's a good place to begin, is it not? And for me then, the only big question that sort of rings around in my mind quite a fair bit was that a win on merit, or was it handed over to Oscar? In my mind, it's very clear. Formula One nowadays is so inclined towards the start. Not my words. Lando Norris, Spanish GP 2024, after he lost it, he said, man, I did everything right. I just should have nailed the start. Look at the list of bad starts, unfortunately, that Lando Norris has recently made. Today, where he lost the insight on Oscar Piastri and Max Verstappen. 2024 Spanish GP, lost it. China, when he was on pole, went down to 7th. Silverstone, where he should have been ahead of Max Verstappen crucially, but wasn't. Qatar 2023, where Oscar Piastri won his first ever race because Lando Norris couldn't do enough to get a bet on him on the start. History repeats itself. And yes, you mentioned, Kunal, that he proved his point in the last stint. But I don't see it as a handover in any way whatsoever. If anything, Piastri took the important decision-making time with him in his hand.
Firstly, and I know now Oscar Piastri has 2 race wins and Lando Norris has 1 race win. Who very beautifully, again in the post-race press conference that I sat in, Oscar said, that sprint win actually makes the whole stat a little weird for me, because today is what actually feels like a race win, even though I won the sprint race last year. So, but you've posed a very, very interesting question, right? F1 is about meritocracy. It is about being selfish. It's about, being in the right place at the right time. Oscar Piastri and Lando Norris got played in by McLaren. Okay. McLaren, in my words, put their drivers in a situation where they needed to orchestrate a swap on on circuit, where the action happens, right? And here is when Lando Norris wanted to show that actually I'm the faster driver. So he pulled that final stint. He was driving quicker than the tires needed him to drive, or the teams needed him to drive with the tire management protocol that they follow. And then he gave up that position. And Oscar Piastri was, of course, nervous, much like the McLaren pit wall was nervous. But Lando Norris said, I always knew I was going to give up that position. I initially planned to give it up on the last corner of the last lap. Oh. But then I realized that if ever there was a safety car situation, Oscar Piastri would have lost position to Max Verstappen, right? So he said, hence, I decided I would do it before so I don't look silly.
One second.
And that's why.
Do we realize how big of a comment that is? He's basically calling his teammate incompetent compared to Max.
No, but he didn't. No. But no. 1 sec. Safety car. If there was a safety car that would come, okay, and if they were to double stack, Oscar Piastri would lose just on the very fact that he would have had to wait those crucial seconds. So that's what he meant. He didn't mean incompetency. If anything, he actually went on to say Oscar deserved it today. He nailed it at the start. I lost it at the start. He also said, I knew that was the right thing to do. I knew that if I put myself in Oscar's shoes, I know how I would have felt. He also acknowledged just how many number of times Oscar has actually moved over for him. Although he also pointed out that those number of times were different because they weren't for the race win itself. So, like I said, I started my point by saying McLaren put their drivers in this situation, a situation they could have avoided. But even when you look back in hindsight, a situation that they probably put themselves in just to safeguard all their moves on track, saying a Red Bull won't checkmate me and a Mercedes won't checkmate me. So I will still get a 1-2 and I will trust that our drivers will swap on track. That was their strategy.
Trust, or maybe leaving a little bit too much to their drivers' hands, Sundaram. I mean, we all at the venue were confused, concerned. Like, what's all happening here? That's the last thing you'd want to do on track, right? We'll get to why in a second. But do you get them? Do you get why McLaren did that in the first place?
See, it was a mistake. And what they were trying to do was undo it. That's the bottom line. They made a mistake I wouldn't say that they made a mistake by pitting in Norris, because in a way they were trying to cover Hamilton. But if you look at the numbers, he didn't seem much of a threat to McLaren at that point. Probably a lap or two later, they still had a very good buffer. So even if rather than a 2.5 second pit stop, if they had a 5 second pit stop, they would still come out in front of Hamilton. So although their argument was we were trying to cover Hamilton, but in the process, 2 laps later is when Piastri pitted. And by then, Norris was ahead of him. And then they realized, oops, we've made a mistake. The person who made the better start, the person who deservedly should win this race because he's held on and not he's managed to start comparatively well. So we feel that he should be the one winning this, and we don't want him to feel that he lost it for no fault of his own. They were trying to undo that. Yes, Kunal.
Very interesting, because you're right. McLaren could have waited before deciding what they wanted to do and cover Lewis Hamilton. But if we think back of all our episodes in the last 5 or 6 races, including the preview, right, we will realize that we used to say, well, why is McLaren just not following what everyone else does? Right? Why aren't they pitting and chasing? Why aren't they pitting and defending? So for one race, McLaren actually did do that. So it can go both ways. And I think, like you said, Sundaram, they pitted Norris first to cover for Lewis Hamilton. They let Oscar know that they're pitting Norris, which is, of course, a good thing to do, because sequentially, it would have meant that the driver who's up on the road gets a first priority call on the pit stop, which would have, in this case, meant Oscar Piastri. But they let Piastri be out because Max Verstappen decided to go longer as well. So they said, we've got 2 drivers in the fight. Red Bull and Mercedes didn't. So they said, we will go with both our drivers to try and negate, like I said, a checkmate situation with both the other teams. Now, having said that, even before even before Oscar Piastri pitted and got undercut, they told him, "We are going longer with you, but you do not have to worry about Lando." So they kept reassuring Oscar Piastri all along. So in my mind, I think McLaren actually executed the race strategy very well. Right? They also executed the race communication very well. At no point did they let either of the drivers not be in the know of what their plans were.
Yeah.
Right? So yes, they could have, what do you say? They could have managed it better had they not overthought of the whole checkmate situation. But it's very easy to sit back and be like, oh, they could have done different. And every race we fault McLaren for doing that. We sit back and we sit in their seats 5 days later and try and dissect it. For once, I'm like, that's it. Great. They knew, they had trust in the drivers and they do it. Of course, optically, it looks bad because Hamilton's 200th win, McLaren won 2, Piastri's first win, Verstappen and Hamilton come together. But what's the one thing we are discussing? Could McLaren have still done it differently?
No, of course. I'm just wondering if they could foresee this, because I don't know if it's a case of them having 100% trust in Norris absolutely going and swapping the position around. I mean, Norris, if you look at it from Norris's perspective, he's won just one race so far. He's been hunting for that second win for the last 7 races, and he's lost a lot of those races. So in that situation where one of your drivers is trying everything to win his second race and you're putting him in a position where he could be winning a race, why would he back down? And that's why, after that first mistake of not having a good start, it was not Norris's fault. It was the team's fault. So he could have been absolutely selfish. And like he also said in the post-race press conference, you need to be selfish in Formula One. And he is looking for that second win. And I've said this before, there is no guarantee that McLaren's pace is going to continue till the end of the season or even next year. You don't know how many races he's going to win. He doesn't want to be that person who has just one race win and still a lot of potential that has to be untapped. So in my opinion, Norris didn't have to do that, but what he felt was the bigger picture. Yeah, I need to do what the team wants me to do. And what the team there towards the end said was absolutely right. You can't win a championship on your own. But in my opinion, at least, I think they left too much for the drivers. Like we discussed even in the previous races. When you're dealing with such drivers who are still early in their careers, who don't have that much experience, my argument would still be maybe don't leave so much to them. That's the only.
And when there's no clear team hierarchy, is the one thing that I have to say. When there's no team hierarchy,
yeah. But why don't we switch it around? What could have happened if Lando Norris would have disobeyed team orders? Let's discuss that. But before I say, before we actually go there, one last point on what Sundaram said about inexperience. The truth is, in that inexperience or taking that inexperience into account, they are still putting the driver and trusting them to do what is the most difficult job, which is to race these cars. Okay. So Andrea Stella actually said this, that I had 100% trust in both the drivers, that they would act in the interests of the team. And he considered as a wheeled comment or not, he said, if I didn't have the trust, they wouldn't be racing for the papaya colored cars. He actually said that. So
that's great.
Let's segue into what could have actually happened if Lando Norris would have disobeyed team orders, because Max Verstappen has, Sebastian Vettel has, Lewis Hamilton. In fact, this race in 2014 against Nico Rosberg, or 2016, I can't remember, one of the years this happened. What could have happened if Lando Norris would have disobeyed team orders?
He simply wouldn't. He's not a championship contender. It's not consequential a race enough, in my opinion, to disobey team orders for. Then again, Multi-21 also wasn't. Sebastian Vettel is just one hungry driver, or rather was at that point in time. But why would you? Why would you do that? When there's a long innings left to go, when there's a long road left for you to go into, with harder circumstances coming your way, because the driver who's just beaten you for your race win today is only going to get better. Why bother spoiling it now? You might as well hold on to the relationship for longer, right? And I don't believe Norris would have done anything against it. Thinking in one way is one thing, acting in one way is completely the other. And these guys, they're nice kids. They won't do that competitively. Had it been, you don't see that same ruthlessness in the way they drive or the way they communicate compared to that last generation. Give the same to a Max.
We all remember Brazil 20.
Yeah.
I never remember these races, but okay, what happened in Brazil 22?
No. So Max Verstappen had already sealed the world championship, and there was a possibility that Perez would come second. He said, "No, I'm not swapping positions.
No chance.
I'm not doing that. If he wants to do it on merit."
But
And also,
that's
where's the order?
ruthlessness.
What's the
That's
order at
ruthlessness
McLaren?
there.
Who knows? Who is number one now? Like, if statistically, they both are tied at one race win, Grand Prix win each. Who is the number one driver now? How do you pick?
Typically, it's always the driver who's leading the drivers' championship, who's the most probable of being finishing highest in the drivers' championship. But like you said, is there even a drivers' championship that McLaren is a part of, or Lando Norris is a part of? Lando is very, very sure he is a part of it, which I agree, till it's not mathematically over. It's not mathematically over. All you need is Max Verstappen having 2 or 3 bad races, being taken out on the opening lap, or races like he's had today. He's, not done himself any favors. He has almost 80% of 80, points of a lead. That's why he could drive the way he wanted to. But, I know Sundaram is here where he'll throw a fact saying never has a world title been won with 80, points as a gap, which is true, right? But I would say it's never over till it's over. So, Lando Norris dreaming of that world championship at some point is absolutely for it. And the cool down room, interestingly, Lewis and Lando had that banter. Lewis said, "Wow, you guys are a great car, fast car." And Lando said, 7 years, you had the fastest car. And Lewis is saying, "I'm just complimenting you." He's like, "Yeah, you had your chance. Now is ours." Okay. And who is that ours? Yeah. He's, of course, saying that for himself. Now, ours, he doesn't mean, Oscar Piastri.
And that's what, again, say what you want about the way McLaren are handling this. That's what we like about them. They're looking forward, always looking for the bigger targets, the bigger wins. They're always dreaming and looking further ahead. And what's the first thing you get told when you step onto a racetrack to ride a bike or to drive a car? Look forward. In life, in racing, it always works. Sometimes it leads to calls that can be, let's say, that make you seem a little underconfident, make you seem a little bit like you're overthinking it, which is what we probably saw today. But if Andrea Sella can come out after that and make a statement like, "Hey, they wouldn't even drive for us if I didn't trust him," that is assurance. That is McLaren working in the right direction. But
that's great. So legally, right? This is all emotional. Yeah. This is all subjective. Samuel, you disobeyed a team order. I don't like you anymore. I won't back you. I'll back Sundaram. Yeah. But what could there be legal repercussions to this in the contract? Because, unlike Formula 2, where you're driving for yourself and you actually pay the team to build a car for you, Formula 1, you're employed by the team. Yeah. Well, it's a contractual employment, but you're still employed. You're told the team always comes first. Okay. Could there be legal repercussions? I don't think so. What could the worst have been? He would have said, "Sorry, oops, I had to win." Yeah. Or he would have said, "You know what? Oscar was too behind. I couldn't risk giving up on 5 seconds."
That's basically the same thing as saying, "Oops, I had to win."
Yeah. So, like David Coulthard said on the F1 TV commentaries, like he was scared he would lose his contract with McLaren. And that's why he gave up the position in 1996 or whenever he did to Mika Häkkinen, right? So it all goes down to what the risks are of defying a team completely and why a driver like Max Verstappen can get away with it, but not Lando Norris. And Lando actually said again in the post-race press conference, I remember, Lewis Hamilton 2020 or 2021 actually got position here from Valtteri Bottas to go chase Max Verstappen on the last lap. He gave the position back, even though he could have used the extra points to help himself in the championship. And he says, "This is not how I want to win a championship." Lando Norris said the same thing today. "This is not how I would like to win a championship, by taking a win away from Oscar Piastri." So, different people just cut from different fabrics, I would say, different values, different ways of looking at racing, winning, and so on. But
it's not the thinking that matters, yes. It's the acting that matters. And he acted well. No, I mean, acted in good spirit. Right. Acted, you get the point. But you were saying something, Sundaram, about this whole incident. Yeah, but
About
I mean,
Piastri?
about bringing this whole conflict between the two of them up, right? I remember you having a point.
Now
Okay,
I'm blank.
let's put a question to you then. Uh, where do McLaren go from here now? Before we discuss Max, because that is something that attracted so much debate at our live streaming today that we had to go for our longest ever post show at 45 minutes because people just wouldn't let go of the mic. It is incredible. But the question legitimately is there for McLaren now. And I'd love for both of you guys to also weigh up on this. Is Piastri's ceiling higher than Lando? I know there are issues with time management. The last stint was a good example. But in places like the start, where it takes pure focus and grit, in things like qualifying at Monaco, where you just need to absolutely be dialed in, and just hanging around the outside of someone like Sergio Perez, when you need just proper aggression, I see that in Oscar more than I see that in Lando. That's not to say that Lando is a bad driver or worse at the moment. He is the better one. But the ceiling, where do you see, guys? Where do you see that lining up for the two of them? What about you, Sundaram?
That's an interesting question which you've asked me before, and I've had ample amount of time to think about this once again after giving you an answer.
Only a
before.
couple of hours before, so it's not
And
too long.
See, yes, a couple of hours ago. But the fact is that the sort of talent that Lando and Oscar have come in with, and a lot of the sort of trophies they've won or championships that they've won is largely similar. But when you look at it on one metric for me, which is I really love Oscar Piastri's calm demeanor. And in contrast, if you look at the way how Lando tends to perform under pressure, that's going to be a very key thing between you winning a championship or not winning a championship in such crucial moments. So, yes, Lando is the better driver at this point. He does come in with more experience with McLaren and in Formula One. But Oscar's that calm demeanor, at least it prompts to me that he will be able to perform in these situations. And a very classic example of that is, despite the whole Alpine and McLaren saga, he was put into a McLaren seat with a lot of focus, a lot of the spotlight about how he performs. Yes, that car did not perform initially, but then the moment that car had the upgrades, it did have the pace. He was not necessarily matching Lando, but he was there or thereabout. So he was performing to what the pace of the car was. That can be a pressure situation for a rookie, and he did very well. So, yes, his second season might not have been as successful or how we felt compared to last year, but it's not a case of him losing his pace. He's right there. And maybe, now I'll probably change my answer to what I told you earlier. Maybe, just maybe, Oscar's ceiling is slightly above Lando for that one very reason.
It's very well explained. I would say both the drivers are, of course, at a very different stage in their careers. And I remember, Lando Norris has this picture of him signing Fernando Alonso's T-shirt on Formula One social media just 2 hours before the race. They tweeted that. And I actually tweeted to Formula One saying, 6 years ago, Lando Norris, as a reserve driver for McLaren, carried coffee from the McLaren hospitality to the McLaren garage for Fernando Alonso. And, they made this look like, how the interns would be in an office that, hey, I'm interning you, which means, are you making coffee for me, for example, right? So when you see Lando Norris come of age from that boyish, childish, not childish, but childlike personality he's been, his personality has evolved. He's, of course, gotten quicker in the car. He was up against Carlos Sainz, who beat him. Lando Norris was, up against Daniel Ricciardo, who he beat. Okay. And now there's Oscar Piastri, again, the talent of the coming generation. Lando's the talent of this generation. And he's still holding his stead very well. So to me, it's extremely difficult to choose. But that said, the overlap in their careers is such that I believe Norris versus Piastri is something we're going to have at McLaren for a long time. Although something tells me that Piastri is going to be the one who will jump to another team because McLaren will always remain Norris's team, even if we keep in mind what happened today. It's always still going to be Lando Norris. So it's how Red Bull is Max Verstappen's, and I don't know whose Ferrari is going to be. But next year, I mean. But either way, I think it's going to be interesting to see how Oscar and Lando as as rivals progress in Formula One.
What a story, huh?
Are they already
Are they?
rivals?
Absolutely.
Are they already rivals? Really?
Wouldn't you think so?
Because if you look at the cool down room today, there was some sort of weird tension between Norris and Piastri, and I was wondering, why is this tension there? It is supposed to be with the team, because they are the ones who really created this sort of confusion or this situation in the first place. Why is there tension between these two drivers? There was nothing that happened between them on
True.
track.
And probably the tension was because Lando's like, I gave you the win, and Oscar was like, thank you for the win, but it's anyway mine what you had. So it was that thing. And like you said,
Yeah.
Lando said,
Yeah.
I didn't want the lead. The team just gave it to me. So I was undoing the lead. And he actually said, I got tempted, right? I wanted that win. And we've all been in these
Who wouldn't be?
situations
Who wouldn't be?
exactly. He's human.
Yeah.
It was a beautiful display of human temptation and still choosing to do the right thing. And trust me, very, very few of us actually stand up in these situations and still do the right thing.
I think if we have a contract termination clause on us doing the right thing, I think we would all do the right thing. I mean, if we had a clause saying our
But
contract
I-
would be terminated if we just grab that cookie from the cookie jar, I think we probably wouldn't grab it, would we? We wouldn't
No,
do that.
but you're right. You're right. But I don't believe that disobeying team orders would lead to a suspension.
something
Not in
something
a
to
case-
sour it over. Something to doesn't leave you the same, right?
I mean, Lewis and Nico took each other out. Okay, and they still raced for the team, continued to do so. Lewis continues to do so. Max over the years has disobeyed team orders. Sebastian Vettel did that. So one doesn't know. I don't believe a suspension would have happened. I mean, Daniel Ricciardo crashed into the back of Max Verstappen in Baku, as we remember, and nobody got suspended for it, even though it was, depending on who you ask. But if you ask me, Max just caused that moment by driving like Max Verstappen, as he does, which I absolutely love. Okay. But
Opening a can of
yeah,
worms.
I know, But my point is, I don't believe there would have been, hey, I'm going to sack you, for example, and you're going to not race for McLaren. and so
something
on.
though. Yeah.
But he didn't want to risk it, obviously.
It wouldn't have been nice. He wouldn't be welcomed back in the garage. Let's put it that way. But okay, wait. We've digressed far too much. We need to get back to talking about. You mentioned something. I remember you, Kunal, particularly saying, "Get away with it." I really want to use those words back again and just ask a question. How many times can a driver get away by being extreme in their driving mannerisms? This time, I do agree. The other driver could have done more to avoid it. But the case still remains. How do you race someone who does not want to race with you? Who do you think I'm talking about? I'm talking about Esteban Ocon fighting with Pierre Gasly at the back of the grid. You didn't know, did you?
Something that the broadcasters didn't show at all, because Pierre Gasly, poor guy, hydraulics issue today. Yesterday was Alpine didn't send him out on track. Silverstone, they had a gearbox issue. So, he was asked, is it because Alpine, he was asked, he's saying, is it because Alpine is trying very fast to catch up with the rest? And he's like, poor guy has this, embarrassing face, because these are operational issues. If you are wrong on strategy, it doesn't matter if you're in a Ferrari or a Haas. If your hydraulics are an issue, if your gearbox is an issue, it doesn't matter if you're in a P1 or a P10 car. But anyway, yeah. So clearly you were not talking about Alpine, because you're like,
I'm not gonna
eyes
take
are rolling
names.
when I just went.
I'm not going to take names.
But okay, let's get to it. I know it's Max Verstappen. Could he have driven differently?
No. So no. The question comes back from 2021. What Sommel's basically trying to ask is a question from 2021. Whose fault was it? Was it Max or was it Lewis's fault? You're picking this up from probably, what are you saying? Italy 21 or Jeddah 21 or Brazil 21?
I find it interesting
So
because
why don't
Andreas Teller said these issues will pop up once again if you don't address them at the source. Guess what? They've popped up at the next race.
There you have it.
It's incredible. The next race. Actually, the next one. But here we are. Have your say, Kunal. What do you think about this now?
Max Verstappen was extremely frustrated, obviously, right? Now, if we were to dissect that incident, there were two parts to it. Firstly, the steward ruled no action, which I think is right. Lewis Hamilton said it was a racing incident, which I also partially agree with. I would say more partial rather than less partial. So what happened is Max, of course, DRS, carried more speed, went in and suddenly realized, oops, I have to brake too much in too little space and then I won't be able to turn in. So he locked his brakes, he went straight. Now imagine if he was just by himself, he would have locked his brakes, gone straight, understeered, gone off circuit, and joined back again with a flat spot or not. It just so happened that he was in battle with Lewis Hamilton, and Lewis Hamilton had a corner he was preparing to turn into.
That's the thing. That's the thing.
Yeah.
Lewis Hamilton of all people. Lewis Hamilton
Exactly.
of all
But
people.
that's the thing. A car doesn't just so happen to be racing with you. You're racing with a car. It's my whole argument. It just doesn't happen to be there when you want to get to a corner. It's already there. You're trying to pass it. That's the one thing
Yeah, so the stewards actually ruled very nicely, saying, and this is what I would feel. Yes, racing incident, glad nobody got penalized. Could Lewis have done a little more to avoid contact? Maybe. But did Lewis purposely build contact? No. He was in the momentum of turning in. He thought maybe Max would just about make it or not. Remember, these are high speeds we're talking of, even if it's just turn one. Right, they were going through a back marker, so that also sort of serves as a bit of a distraction because you go offline and you rejoin and so on. So at the end of the day, that Max Verstappen situation was just unfortunate. I would say Max must do better in situations where he doesn't have the Red Bull, but Max was very, very clear, and I think what he was clear about is first, Red Bull needs to add performance to the car, and second, I think Red Bull's pit wall typically doesn't make mistakes, but this time they made the same mistake 2 times over. And that mistake was letting Max be undercut 2 times. First by Lewis, second time by Leclerc, and Christian Horner said post-race, you know what we read wrong? We read wrong the delta that the 2 tires needed to make an overtake. So the offset that they thought Max was creating would help him gain track position. But this is Hungary. Track position is very, very difficult. And Red Bull doesn't have the 33-second advantage at the same circuit they had last year. So if they fumble, Ferrari and Mercedes are not too far behind to pick up those pieces. Now it is McLaren that's definitely up ahead.
So the first time Verstappen got undercut was when they switched from their first set of tires onto the hards. Now, there was a 5-lap difference between Hamilton's pit stop and Verstappen's pit stop. Hamilton was 1 second behind Max Verstappen at the time of the pit stop. He came back 7 seconds ahead. In 5 laps, he'd taken 8 seconds out. Now, there is a reason behind this. Red Bull were aware of what they were doing. The idea was basically to make sure that Max Verstappen goes on the ideal medium strategy, which was to extend it as much as you can, so that you can then have as few laps as possible for your hard compound tires. Fair enough, normal, especially when the mediums are not doing too bad. But Sundaram, why did it not work out for them? What really went wrong that Hamilton eventually came up ahead? And in a way, it sabotaged his own race with that whole strategy, which he also claims wasn't quite the best one.
I mean, Verstappen's been saying that since the very beginning, and even Hamilton on the other side was saying that we've pitted a bit too early, and this is going to cause me problems. So both of them saying the same thing. But like Kunal said, track position in Hungary is very, very key. You don't want to be stuck behind another car, especially like I said, there's a lot of temperatures running through your brakes. You saw the cooling louvers as well that Red Bull have come this weekend. So you cannot be stuck behind another car for a long period of time. And there's only one DRS zone. There are only 2 DRS zones, but there's only one straight. And all the high-speed sections, your car is continuously building temperature. So it was crucial for him to have track position. It's crucial for him also to pass Lewis Hamilton. But unfortunately, that's what's happened. And that's why he was that livid. We cannot be pitting 5 laps later. In the second stint, they pitted 9 laps later. If you look at the numbers, if you look at Hamilton pitting the second time, you could see that it was Hamilton going a second per lap every single lap. And even Leclerc was catching pace. Leclerc actually pitted along with Hamilton the second time. If you see the graphics that show from AWS, you can see Verstappen is falling behind from Hamilton and Leclerc. Red Bull knew that they were doing this, but they still felt that they had enough to get position back by passes, which is quite difficult around this track.
Ultimately, Kunal, the only thing I can think of from this is had Verstappen not clashed with Norris, or rather, sorry, not Norris, had Verstappen and Hamilton not gotten together, had it been a fair pass, Mercedes' strategy, which ultimately ended up disrupting Red Bull, wouldn't have been beneficial ultimately for them in the end. They just would have been where they were. So Mercedes fooled Red Bull Racing while trying to get the best out for themselves. But they got that by Red Bull having a crash with them and Mercedes not optimizing their own strategy. It's a little weird thing. It's not.
No, but I don't believe Mercedes didn't optimize their own strategy because they had two sets of hard to use. Whereas if I read that now, so Hamilton used the hard 24 laps in the first stint, then he did 16 laps on the medium, and then he did 30 laps on the hard. So they ran to their stint lengths, especially because they knew they could create the undercut. The undercut, as always, was very, very powerful. And remember, they knew that if they give Lewis Hamilton track position, he probably might be able to keep Max Verstappen or whoever else back. I mean, we saw Alonso do this to Hamilton a couple of years ago, championship winning car that year, right? 2021, that he could do that. So Hungary, all about track position. They said, we're going to do what we have to do to give Lewis track position. I don't believe Mercedes actually did anything wrong, especially, I mean, we're probably just reacting to Lewis's radio, but just how many times is Lewis complimented a strategy call on the radio in real time?
Fair.
In real time. And I'm not blowing, I'm not sort of accusing him. I'm just saying in real time, the driver is seldom, thought that it's the right strategy. This after the race, they sit down, they do the debrief, and oh yeah, we actually made the right calls then. So I think they ran very well. They ran very well with Russell to finish 8th from Q1 yesterday or on Saturday. Red Bull ran very well with Perez as well from Q1 to 7th as well. So for the first time since I don't even know how many races, and this is probably where I could be wrong, but the top 4 teams took the 8 positions. Yuki Tsunoda, of course, took 9th, scored points for the 7th time in the season, and Lance Stroll then scored the last point for Aston Martin.
We still have to get back to Max because GP called him a few things on the radio, not for the moves, but for the way he reacted to things not going in his favor. Immature and childish were the 2 words I heard. Fair? Unfair?
I don't know if I heard. I don't know if I heard immature.
Childish.
But
Childish was certainly on there. Yeah.
I am a fan. He said childish. He said the rants about him attempting to pass Hamilton were childish. And that's what I was saying. I'm a fan of these exchanges between GP and Max. We've seen this from last year. I think it was Belgium, where he was asking Max, okay, fine, you tell us what strategy do we have to go, what tires, what stint lengths, and we'll do it. And I absolutely love it that there's one person who can take that tone with a 3-time world champion and some who has that sort of a personality, and it's GP, and it does it so effortlessly. We saw this in qualifying yesterday as well, and we saw it today. And this is just him being absolutely frank. And that's all I have to say. We can further go and dissect into it. Yes.
But very nice that you say this. It also shows just how comfortable they are with each other. Both of them honest, blunt, straightforward, don't waste time. And that's what you want to do. You don't want to waste time when you're on a racing car and the clock is always ticking. But there's a beautiful stat that Marcus Yestal from Parc Fermé tweeted to me after the race. He said it's the first time since 2021 that there has been more than 3 races between a Max Verstappen win.
Oof.
Can you imagine? 7 wins at the start of the year on the trot. We thought that's it. Another 12 race win streak is coming. And now almost everything is halted. Or I would say like Frederick Vasseur said, he said, I'm loving it. Great. Congrats, Oscar, McLaren, Formula One. It's great for the sport. We've got another race winner. I'm loving this season for what it is. And you're like, okay, wow, that's great. He's, you're of course first a fan of Formula One before you're the team principal of Ferrari.
Yeah. But wait, on Max very quickly. I know I particularly have been very critical of his driving. And that basically means Max Verstappen has given me a big FU because that's what he said. Critics, F off. great, taking it on the chin. But we need to give it to him when it matters, because when he was complaining of the car not braking and turning in very well, at that point, he went on to match Oscar Piastri for pace, the leader. And Oscar Piastri was one of the faster cars out there. Just I think Norris and him were trading the fastest lap at that point. And Verstappen was only a few hundredths or a few tenths at best of Oscar Piastri at that middle sector of that race. Give it a bow. I mean, if the car's really not working, it takes a Max Verstappen to make it work. That's where he's the best in the world at.
But you also got to remember the radio messages are most of the time delayed by half a lap, 1 lap or something, couple of laps as well. Sometimes even more than that if they think it's a spicy radio message that they've not really found to use time before. They just slap it on later. But Max Verstappen, of course, I'd love to, at the moment it seems like he is going to get the Drivers' Championship and that McLaren is going to get that Constructors' Championship. And can you imagine, just in Monaco, we were like, is Charles Leclerc in the fight? And now suddenly Charles Leclerc is nowhere and Lando Norris is maybe in the fight. Yeah. And, if you just look through the Drivers' Championship, of course, it's Verstappen at the top, Norris, Leclerc. Norris has jumped Leclerc even more so, built a gap. There's Carlos Sainz, Piastri. Lewis Hamilton has now jumped Checo Perez for 7th. George Russell is 8th, and then Fernando Alonso's 9th with 45 points, like less than half the points of Russell in 8th position that there is. But McLaren, of course, jumped Ferrari with 338 points. Yeah. Now they are second in the Constructors' Championship, less than 60 points away from Red Bull Racing in the top. So by what race do you think McLaren could get the lead of the Constructors' Championship? We got 11 races to go, something?
Yeah, we have 11 races to go. But they'll get there. I feel they'll get there. But the one point I actually want to make, it's not going particularly well at Red Bull. We know that it's not been going well since Imola. And when the frustration is evident, you can see that Red Bull are crumbling little by little. It is also a case of Austria where I think Max had a long pit stop, or he did have a long pit stop, and he was very animated after that, which then led to him and Lando coming together. So that was one high pressure and a moment of frustration, and he kind of buckled, or I would say, which led to the two of them coming together. And it's another situation today. We've not seen Red Bull in such a situation in a long time. So how are they going to go ahead from here is also a very key thing. Yes, they have issues with the car as well. And you can see a little bit of issues maybe with strategy as well. If Verstappen wants to win that Drivers' Championship, he has demanded that they improve their operations. He's demanded that. He said that. So that's the sort of level that he really is operating at, and that's what he's expecting from the rest of the team.
Which is epic, isn't it? That's what Formula One is all about, ultimately, is it not? Like, the highest...
Depends. Not if you are... I don't know. Should we just jump to Ferrari, because God knows where they have disappeared, if that's the word to put it as. They have been outscored by McLaren every single race since Monaco, which is Canada, Spain, Austria, Silverstone, and now Hungary, right? And Mercedes has...
they've been jumped. They've been jumped.
They've been jumped. And even Mercedes has outscored them since Monaco, right? So the question is, if Scuderia Ferrari doesn't improve, could they be under threat from Mercedes, for example? So Charles Leclerc was very, very upset after the race yet another time. Just no pace in the car. That's what confuses him. In fact, for once, he was so vocal because Ferrari filled very little drink in his drink system. So he was like, "You guys are really pushing me to the limit." He was on the radio and he said, I anyway drink very little race, but I just about have one sip and then it's over. He's like, I get thirsty after the race. So they said, don't worry. No, we're going to fix it for you. So there's one more thing that they're going to fix from Spa onwards, which is give him a little bit more drink.
We definitely missed that one. We
Wait,
didn't
isn't
catch
this the
that.
same circuit where Kimi did not have the drink? I think it
There are
was.
lots
No?
of circuits Kimi didn't have the drink.
I think it was, right?
wouldn't know.
Nicely done. Nicely done. I remember on my birthday, 4th of November 2012, Kimi Raikkonen won, and I was like, Kimi Raikkonen is going to have a drink. And I remembered it's the UAE, and he can't. And then a few years later, he also got denied by Ferrari. I think at this very circuit. But confusing for them. And for me, really, for Ferrari, I think the one that summed it up was Carlos Sainz's Q3 lap. Sector 1 purple, Sector 2 personal best, Sector 3 he's 4 tenths down on pole. That is weird. That is weird. Do they have an answer? I don't think they do.
The challenge of the Hungaroring is that you run out of tires by the end of the lap. So it's all about making those tires last through all the energies that you throw into them as well. Carlos Sainz out-qualified Leclerc, but he just said he had a bad start and he sort of couldn't recover from there. So it just goes to show what you said, a few minutes before, or almost an hour ago, Somal, that, the start dictates so much of how the trajectory of your race is going to go.
Yes, indeed. With that, I think we should jump to Aston Martin now, right? And their whole team honor incident, because
we should finish talking of all teams, and then I have a question about McLaren for the two of you. Okay. Very interesting. We'll revisit the whole Piastri Norris thing, but it's an interesting question.
Let's do it.
Yeah. Another 50 minutes.
Who was at fault?
No, not about fault. I'm going to switch the situation. And see what shows up. But Aston Martin team orders. Alexander Albon turned around and said, Fernando Alonso was playing team orders. He was bunching up the whole grid so, Lance Stroll could make a pit stop. Lance Stroll made a pit stop. Then I think they swapped. They swapped Stroll and Alonso. They told Stroll, you go and chase Tsunoda. If you don't get Tsunoda, you got to swap again. And Stroll did not swap again. And he said, Fernando's 4 seconds behind me. I'm not making this up. I'm serious. So anyway, he got a point.
Can you imagine the annoyance of all those midfield drivers looking at Fernando Alonso thinking, hey, I could pass him, only to realize, oh no, he's doing this so that Lance Stroll can get past. The annoyance, it must burst your head thinking that he's only doing that because he's being paid millions and millions of dollars so that the son of the person who runs the team can just get 1 point at the end. It must cause a lot of self-doubt if you're Alex Albon, right? Like, is this what I'm racing for? It's such a weird place to be.
Alexander Albon was planning to do a 3-stop race, so he started using his tires more. And then the team came and told him, we're actually going to do a 2-stop. And he was furious because he was using his tires up thinking it's a 3-stopper. But why don't we actually... Okay, one word on Yuki Tsunoda, 7 points, 7 times in the points. Great. He said it's weird if Red Bull Racing choose Liam Lawson instead of him. He says he deserves that seat against Max Verstappen. Daniel Ricciardo, his teammate, got out-qualified by Yuki, but he was pitted too early, and Daniel was so furious. He said, we took ourselves out of the race too early. Okay, so that's essentially what happened. But the point that I'm going back to McLaren, assuming that we're going to end this soon now, is what if Lando Norris would have given up that position early on, okay, the minute he was told, and then he would have chased Oscar Piastri on merit for that race win, given that he was in that faster McLaren. How do you guys think this would have turned out?
I think McLaren would have panicked and basically said, Lando hold position, because they didn't want contact.
That's what I'm expecting. Why would they ask him to swap and then...
Yeah, and
you've literally thrown something at us which we've not even thought about in the last 3 hours.
That's what you're so excellent at, in different perspectives.
No, but thank you. But you guys actually, in your own perspectives, have said that, because we all discussed and agreed the start was so critical. Oscar got it at the start. McLaren engineered an Oscar win on the radio, on the pit wall, in the car, all of that. My reading in all of this was... And I'm going back to the radio messages that I remember going through. McLaren told Lando 40s, mid-40s, and I presume that meant pitting around the 40th, between the 45th lap or whenever they pitted. The positions for the final stint wouldn't change unless they were changed before the final stop. That's my reading. So McLaren, while yes, whoever got the lead at the start of the race was crucial to keep in mind of, they did not want a swap or a battle in the final stint. So I believe they would have, like Somil you said, and Sudaram you agreed, they would have told Lando Norris to hold position, and they would have still given Oscar Piastri that race win.
So, yeah.
That's a very good point, actually. That's a very good point.
Yep. So basically, are we coming to a conclusion that win the start, win the race? 70% of your job's done?
Win,
Probably.
win the start and keep position before before you go into the pits. I mean, classic example, even the British Grand Prix. So whoever had the lead between both drivers had the lead pit stop.
My favorite McLaren radio message was, remember our Sunday morning meetings. It's like, do they go to the church on Sunday mornings?
Thinking of the
that
same
way?
thing, you know.
Because McLaren were delivering one sermon after the other. You know, they were probably also like, next lap, turn 3, turn 4. Okay, let's just give him the message now. Okay, it's not working, turns 3, turns 4. Can we do turn 7 and 8? Let's give him the message now. Is there a number when it would work? But either way, great win, emotional, fantastic for Oscar Piastri, for Formula One, for all of us, and 1 hour of discussing it with you guys on India's Best Sports Podcast.
Yeah, and we're going to do that in person next Sunday at Malat Social as well. So join us over there. By the way, before we go, a huge thank you to one Abhishek Takle, who's unlikely to be listening at this point. But if you are, man, you are a legend for 2 things today. Firstly, getting to this stage of the episode, and secondly, for joining us unannounced as a guest with a paid ticket. You don't have to do that, Abhishek. We'd call you next time. It's incredible. But he agreed to come on as a part of our post-race show. And it was so awesome because it's amazing firstly to hear how balanced his takes are and how he looks at it with much clarity. And the second thing, the audience really appreciated that. So huge thank you to Abhishek Takle for coming out there as a part of our event and just making it all the more special. And we got to have you next Sunday as well.
Absolutely. And Abhishek Takle, for everyone who's stayed on till now, thank you, is one of India's most reputed FIA accredited Formula One journalists. He's somebody I go to when I need help with everything that I do in Formula One. So it's so glad that you guys got to watch the race and dissect it with Abhishek himself.
No, it's lovely. And everyone loved it. Everyone loved it. We've done it before. We've had a few events. And it'll be even more awesome if we do that together next time at Marat Social, for which you will join us. And for all the people listening outside India, you might be like, how can I do that? Fly down. Mumbai is the place to be. If John Cena can come here, you can too. See you for the next event then. And we'll get back in a couple of days after we've all properly digested the hype from the Hungarian Grand Prix. See you then, folks. Back with the preview for the Belgian GP very shortly. Bye-bye. Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of the Inside Line F1 podcast. Before we ended, I just wanted to say a huge thank you to Amazon Music once again for partnering with us on this episode of the podcast.